Hello and welcome to SpyHards Podcast, where your hosts go deep undercover into the world of spy movies to decipher which films make the knock list. But remember, this information is strictly for your ears only. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur, in desperate need of dental work.
I've been saying it for years.
I know, right?
I really can't stand to look at you.
I know. One of my teeth is like black. You don't want to know how it got to that particular shape.
I think we could all guess. It's because I only feed you scraps.
that as well.
Yeah, you've also got scurvy because you only eat bread now. If more people joined us on the Patreon, I'd be able to feed you richer food. Do you want to deprive Cam of vitamins, folks?
It'd be nice to try a pumpernickel every now and again.
Look at him. He's like wasting away over there. Come and join us, patreon.com/spyhards. Get a bunch of bonus episodes every month and do a little kickback for your favorite spy boys. But we've got an interesting film to talk about, one you have been asking for years. This is year 6 of the show now, and we haven't even mentioned this film before. So I think without further ado, let's introduce our guest and introduce the film. Oh, Cam, I'm out of breath after that run. How are you feeling?
Fine. I just ran a marathon, but I'm good.
I had to get my breath back. But
I know stairs are hard.
Yeah, one flight too many, I think. Oh. But whilst I get my breath back, I think I should probably introduce our guest.
Yes.
And he's got much better lungs than I do. Making his second appearance on the show, he is the author of The Man from Belize, and he has a new book out, which I'm sure he's going to tell us all about. It is the one and only Mr. Steve Kobrin. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, gentlemen. How are you doing? Great to be here.
Living the dream, slightly out of breath. I'm going to have a protein shake and a banana, and I'll feel a bit better. But, to be fair, Dustin Hoffman wasn't drinking a protein shake and eating a banana in this film. He was living off of pretty much beans, wasn't it? I think at one point he's eating beans.
Something like that. Yes.
They were fueling him. Yeah.
Yeah. He's fueled by beans. Steve,
there was a cloud behind him.
Steve, what are you fueled by, Steve?
Well, I'll tell you right now, I'm definitely fueled by the notion of discussing this film. It's not going to be a secret to the listening audience where I stand on this film, because I've made it abundantly clear, I think, in a previous conversation we had, our previous conversation, that where the two kind of Mount Everests of spy films are concerned, I consider North by Northwest to be the greatest spy film ever made. But this particular film that we are talking about today, John Schlesinger's Marathon Man, is my personal favorite spy film of all time.
Gave away the end question already. What, Steve? What's your pick for the knock list? Why don't you tell us now?
No, because listen, you guys, it was going to be. Now, I want to kind of not to be too divisive about this, but
I'll do it.
I know when we're going to get to a point when we start to discuss the notions of what's our favorite moments, what's something we don't like. No, believe it or not, even though The Picture is my favorite spy film of all time, there are a few issues that I have, but I think we kind of need to, and I will try my best to do so, because whereas when we discussed the Chairman the last time around, I had to make copious notes because I think the three of us shared that in common. I sincerely really did not care for that picture. This is a film, just to let you guys know, I had to make 0 notes about.
Wow.
Nothing. This film is so embedded in my DNA, everything about it, that its genesis, its conception, its source material, the great William Goldman, and I'm probably going to be talking a lot about him. This is something that really fuels my fire, and I'm just glad that we're going to be attacking it full force today on the show.
Well, I mean, when it comes to the Chairman, I feel like I'm still trapped underneath that fence with Gregory Peck.
I'm right there with you, for sure.
Just rolling around in the mud, man. I'm just not having a good time.
Right.
I just like that Steve only comes on the show to talk about movies with "man" in the title.
Oh.
You know what? That's a great observation, Cam. Didn't dawn on me, but call it a coincidence. I don't know.
And the book, your first book, is called
The Man from Belize. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because the follow-up book, Sins of the Raven, I think I had a conversation with our mutual friend Bruce not too long ago as to why there was so much time taken in between the first and second novels. The only thing that I can think of is that from a creative standpoint, I think it came down to the simple notion that I didn't want the follow-up to feel like a case of Xeroxing. And what I mean by that is just a copy and paste, some kind of a rush job that I throw out there to purposefully complete the trilogy and have it out there and available because, you know, that's the best way to maneuver an IP is when you have a series. And I said to him, I said, you know what? I said, it wasn't the time back then. It's the time now. And the reality is that the space that comprised the lapse between Man from Belize and Sins of the Raven was just under 7 years. The irony of all this is that when I completed Sins of the Raven, I maintained the continuity as far as like this feels like the Man from Belize universe, but it's far removed and different enough so that when the reader propels themselves into the narrative of the new one, it's going to feel like something completely distinctive and fresh, even though there's a lot of connective tissue and kind of intertwining between the plots of the first one and the second one. But what I was going to say is that the irony of the space and the time that took between the first and the second is that as I was completing Sins of the Raven, I was concurrently outlining the third book in the trilogy. So Bruce now knows that whereas there was 7 years between the first and second, the third one will be out in the spring of 2026 because I just had sort of a creative deluge where it just all sort of came to me and you know, it felt right to sort of execute them back to back. So I'm just very excited, not just for Sins of the Raven to be out, but certainly for the whole trilogy to be complete. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, I have a question. When you're firing on all cylinders like that creatively,
Yeah.
are you still holding to the trilogy, or are you starting to think, you know, perhaps the Belize story could be a quadrilogy or quintology or expand?
No, that's a great question, Cam. And it's certainly a question that Bruce asked me. He said to me, he said, all right, it's great to hear that you're having sort of like this creative frenzy overwhelming you so much that you want to get the third book in my hands that soon after the release of the second. But are you basically thinking that at the conclusion of the third, are you closing all doors on the Man from Belize universe? The answer is no. It's going to have a certain amount of narrative closure, but I'm going to keep a window sort of ajar, as if to say, if we want to revisit this world again, there is a way to do that without seeming contrived. In other words, it would make sense to take that dive into what you just described as, you know, a quadrology. So.
Right, and to make a movie comparison, like not to go the route of like the Bourne films.
No.
You know, where you have the tight trilogy and then, oh boy, we got to figure something out. Jeremy Renner, get in here.
Nothing like that at all.
I would say, Steve, I would take some solace. You talk about the time in between books 1 and 2, and of course, book 2 is out now, and we'll have some links in the show notes as well, so people can go grab their copies.
Yeah.
I will point out that the space in between and then the third book coming out, you've made more stories than we've had Bond films.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't knock yourself because you're doing better than Amazon.
That's another story in and of itself. I'm not sure what the fate of the Bond universe is. I know we've got Denis Villeneuve and Steve Knight connected to it, and that's certainly from a creative artist standpoint very exciting, but it kind of feels like it's lagging as far as I don't know. I mean, as far as the putting the final piece of the puzzle together, it really all right now stems from not giving any closure to the casting. Isn't that right?
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, Denis is still playing in the sand
With
doing
Dune.
Dune 3.
Yeah, right.
Like he's busy.
Right.
And we've learned recently, thanks to Amazon with some lovely edits on their posters, we've lost the famous guns, girls, and gadgets. We've lost the guns, so all we have left is the girls and the gadgets. So we'll see how we go.
Exactly. Well, I don't want to delve too deeply into that because I don't quite see it.
No, I'm sure that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah,
and,
it is.
Trust
it totally is.
I made plenty of fun of it online, and I had a tweet go quite big about that. But my opinion is very loud and proud out there about those sort of choices. But you don't make the same sort of compromises.
No, not even close. If anything, this is actually very inspired. I don't want us to jump in until we actually start the Marathon Man discussion, but I will let you guys know that this is as influenced and inspired by the Fleming world as it is by the Goldman world, but not in the way you're thinking. There is linkage to Marathon Man as far as what the general seeds of inspiration were, but not the Marathon Man film we're going to be discussing. I know that sounds very convoluted, but I will explain. There is a backstory to what I'm saying.
Well, I think then now is the perfect time. What do you say, Cam?
Sure. Yeah, I think we're going to talk about 1976's Marathon Man, directed by John Schlesinger and starring Dustin Hoffman and Sir Laurence Olivier.
It's kind of ironic that a 5K isn't a marathon, but I just the other day did the Slow Horses 5K around London. So I feel like I've done my own personal marathon. Like I'm really sore and beat up after that. I still ache after that run, and I did that 6 days ago.
Did you get aggressive about like Dustin Hoffman did and start cutting through corners to try to beat some other guy?
No, but I was obsessed with my time.
Okay. Yeah.
I found some lady to just time me, and she was like, "I'm trying to run the race myself," and I'm like, "No, you must time me." And yeah, she did it, and I did a terrible time.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Something to be very proud of.
Yeah, but room for improvement.
Yeah, sure.
That's what they say about me often. But if you haven't run the marathon, man, here is your synopsis. Marathon Man, one man's dangerous attempts to clear his father's name. A graduate student and obsessive runner in New York is drawn into a mysterious plot involving his brother and a member of the secretive division.
That tagline isn't accurate. He's not really on a mission to clear his father's name.
No, not even
the whole father plot is something I want to talk about later on, actually. But yeah, it's more about just a mission for survival, really.
Yeah, that's backstory in terms of the scandal of his father, but that's not something he's actively trying to undo.
No, and that's all very nebulously presented. And I will tell you both, gentlemen, it's made a little bit more explicit in the novel. That's something I want to kind of broach here, not to justify my own cause and case for why I love this film so much, but more to say that there were very overt, conscious decisions made by Goldman and the studio as to when he agreed to do the adaptation of his own novel. There were going to be not compromises, just very sort of extreme changes that had nothing to do with the book. And in doing so, make it more consciously cinematic. There are, I think, 3 issues that can be addressed where the novel is concerned that don't coincide with the adaptation. And I think it's important to bring that out into the open and share that with the audience that either may or may not be familiar with both the novel and the film. One of the things that's very differently handled in the film is the reveal of Elsa's character, the Marthe Keller character.
Yeah.
And her duplicity and her betrayal is much more extended in the film as far as the actual reveal of it. And that was done deliberately to basically ratchet the suspense as to where her allegiances actually lied. In the film, Goldman makes it very clear from the outset that she is on the other side and that she is not to be trusted at all. Um, there is that interesting scene, as you guys know, in the midway point in the film, where Scheider takes Hoffman and Marc Keller to that very fancy dinner. I don't know if it was at the Plaza Hotel or something like that. And he basically calls her out. And he says, well, I'm on to you.
Yeah.
I know what you're all about. And Hoffman gets all pissed and blows a gasket and says, what are you doing? You don't know her and all of that. So in the book, there is nothing mysterious about that. Elsa's backstory and her allegiances are made abundantly clear virtually from the outset. Also, I found it interesting that something that Schlesinger and Goldman consciously wanted to change when making the film was that in the book, the Babe character is really what Goldman, in his words, described as a total innocent. And he wanted him to be that because he wanted to have a protagonist who was diametrically opposed to the Christian Zell character, who in Goldman's eyes was just really the epitome of absolute evil. And they thought that for the film, it could be a bit too radical to go that route. And so they made Hoffman not necessarily a man of action. That's really more Scheider's character.
Yeah.
But he was made somebody who was at least more physically adept. It was not accidental that the opening sequence of the film is Dustin running through Central Park. And I personally, as a viewer and as a writer, think that that opening sequence pays off quite beautifully later in the film when you have the extended chase and you see that Dustin is very adroit at running and at escaping and the whole thing of, jumping from one end of the freeway to the other. You don't look at that and say, oh, this is bullshit. You look at it and say, well, no, I kind of buy this. He could do that. He can't do all the, Bondian tropes that the Scheider character does, but he can do that. I believe that. The last thing, and this is the super important part. This is basically where I do think the film becomes very divisive. The ending of the book is radically different. I personally prefer the ending of the book. Now, so does Goldman. What they did, they brought in Robert Towne, obviously no slouch, great screenwriter, and who had a tie to Robert Evans, the producer, because were coming off of Polanski's masterpiece, Chinatown.
And we've talked about Towne quite a bit on the show because he was heavily involved in the first two Mission Impossible films.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. So what they did here, and his rewrite is uncredited, if you want to call it a rewrite. What he really did is he changed the ending because the ending of the book has Babe's character gunning down Zell violently. And Goldman wanted that because he wanted to see the character have a very overreaching and extensive arc where he now became the type of man of violence that he had been so appalled by his entire life. Hence, you do have that scene that kind of embellishes that at the end of the film where Dustin takes the gun and simply throws it into the river. You remember he throws it over the fence out into the river. Now, in Goldman's words, and this is exactly the phrase that he used, he said, I thought that what they did with the ending of the film was, his phrase, typical Hollywood horseshit. The whole idea of Hoffman making Olivier eat the diamonds and eat the diamonds, but it was done purposefully because Hoffman had said, I don't feel comfortable doing this. Hoffman always had a problem with violence on film. This is something that's very well known. And although they got along well on the film, when he made Straw Dogs with Sam Peckinpah 5 years earlier, it was not a contentious relationship, but it was certainly very slightly combative insofar as that Peckinpah always wanted to push the violence and make him more animalistic. And
Yeah.
Hoffman was always looking for ways to reel it in and pull it back. Here, what he did, and I think what he did is he may have perhaps erred on the side of maybe not manipulating, but taking advantage of the very close friendship that he had with Schlesinger, because really working with Schlesinger again was his main MO for wanting to make the movie, because he had always said that making Midnight Cowboy was one of the most rewarding experiences of his life. And I certainly understand that. But he did say to him, he said, when we get to the ending of this film, you might want to have Bill reconsider this because I don't feel right just ending the Zell character the way it's highlighted in the book. I think there's a more clever way we can do it. And so, Cam, getting to your point, this is when they brought in Town, and Town was, starting to sort of like ruminate over theories how it could be done. And he said, well, you have the Zell character using this impaling object that he hides underneath his coat the whole film. Why not have his principal instrument of death be the tool of his own demise?
What's the hoisted by his own petard kind of idea?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's clever from a just sort of like a setup payoff standpoint, sort of, but I don't think it has the same emotional punch that it would have had if we would have seen Hoffman have to go down that road that he had so detested all along as a pacifist, as a student. You know what I'm saying? So, but it doesn't really end there. I mean, it ends there sort of. It ends there where the differences between the novel and the film are concerned. Something that's very important, and I'm not afraid here, you guys, to do anything as far as spoilers are concerned.
No.
Because at this point you're either aware of this universe of this film or you're not. But this is the one part that I think might be of extreme interest to listeners who are fans of this film. So my own interest became amplified and embellished when I learned of William Goldman's final novel, which is a book called Brothers. Now, Brothers is, in fact, a continuation of Marathon Man that focuses exclusively on the Scylla character, the Scheider character. Basically, what it is that he has, because in the film you have the impression that he has been gutted violently by Olivier. In actual fact, Brothers explains that, yes, he was gutted, but he didn't actually die. The film makes you seem like he's stone cold dead. He didn't actually die.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you guys, as a fan of Goldman, as a fan of Marathon Man, I urge you to read Brothers. Brothers, probably more than Fleming's books, Brothers was for me the main creative influence that inspired me to want to write this Man from Belize saga. The Scylla character, when he is put front and center, the turns and revelations of this second book, Brothers, the action set pieces, they're indescribable. They're so brilliant in their conception and in their execution. But he is basically described in Brothers, the Scylla character, as the most dangerous man in the world. And he makes Bond almost look like a lightweight, if you can fathom that. And I'm talking about like Connery Bond. I'm talking about like hard ass Bond, like that.
I was going to say, I could believe it with Roger Moore Bond.
No, not like that. Nope. Yes, the existence of Brothers, I think it's important to acknowledge it. I wanted to bring it up during this session of ours, knowing that we were going to be talking about Marathon Man, because I think not enough people know that Brothers exists. As I say, it was William Goldman's final novel before he finally committed just to being a screenwriter. And
Right.
it is integral to both, I think, better understanding and perhaps more appreciating Marathon Man for its origin setting and certainly where the film itself is concerned.
So what you're saying is you like this film.
You've done a bit of reading, you're saying.
Yeah.
Let's take a beat, because I feel the listeners can feel, Cam might feel, doesn't feel a lot, that you have a lot to say about Marathon Man. But
yeah.
let's get me and Cam out of the way a little bit, because we need to talk about the making of the film. We need to talk about like our introductions to it too, and yours. I'll make it easy. This is the first time I've ever seen this film.
Okay.
So that's me set up. We'll get into my review later. Cam, had you ever seen this film?
Yeah, I saw this film probably 15 years ago or so, maybe a bit longer. And it was one I actually picked up a DVD at Virgin Megastore. They were selling them for like $6 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I thought, I will grab this. I was well aware of the movie for two reasons. There was often referencing the dental torture scene in reviews I would read over the years. People would refer to that as a very unsettling scene. So I'd heard that. I was also quite aware that there was a scene in a Seinfeld episode spoofing this film. And it's in the episode The Doorman, where I think it's like Kramer is walking down the street and an old lady is pointing and screaming at him as he's trying to hide like I can't remember if it's like a VCR, an air conditioner, something like that.
Yes, I remember that. That's referencing this. Okay.
Yes, and I was aware of that because it might have been like an Entertainment Weekly issue or something on Seinfeld pointed that out. And so saw it on the shelf and bought it and really enjoyed it. But it isn't one, unlike Steve, like that I've revisited a lot over the years. Not for any particular reason. I genuinely really enjoyed the movie. It just, for whatever reason, was not one that was on my rotation.
Which is entirely fair.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have so many great films that I've only seen like once or twice. Yeah. It's so true. Yeah.
Well, Steve, I know you'll want to say a lot about it, but do you recall the first time you watched Marathon Man and what your reaction was to it?
I do. I have a very, very tiny, tiny connection to Mr. Hoffman, and I'll tell you what it is. So I grew up in LA, in the west side of LA, and my family and I were all tennis players. And we belonged to a tennis club in the west side of LA called the West Side Racket Club, which Mr. Hoffman was a member as well. And so I used to play in junior tournaments as a kid, and just in passing, he would converse with a couple of my dad's doubles partners, and they got to talking about films and recent films, things like that. So I was probably, I'm not going to lie to you guys, and it's also going to obviously highlight, my age, but that I don't care about that. I was far too young to see this movie as a kid in the theater, far too young, but I did. I saw this as a 4 going on 5. You asked,
wow,
when was my first exposure? Now, at the time, seeing it as a 4 going on 5-year-old kid, seeing it in the theater, because he, as I say, I digressed a little bit. He had told my dad's doubles partners about this new film and when it was going to be coming out, and that in Westwood, California, there would be a couple of advanced screenings at a few theaters there. So we saw it. It was Christmas 1976. And I will say that at first, my reaction as a small child was, I kind of got off on what I think still is a very relentless thrill ride. This movie has a very Vice-like grip to it. It's the type of tension that when it grabs you, it doesn't let go, and it's a ruthless grip, a very ruthless grip. I appreciated that much more in later years. But in asking me what was my introduction, that was literally in the theater at an early screening in Westwood, seeing it, and then subsequently seeing it on pay cable stations like HBO and the Z Channel, taping it on VHS, and then like yourself, Cam, going from VHS actually to Laserdisc, and then from Laserdisc to DVD, and now I have the 4K Blu-ray, and yeah. But I don't know. I can't I probably at 20, I lost the number of times I've seen this. I've probably seen it a little over 30 times.
Wow.
I think there's also then something that plays into this with nostalgia.
Oh,
for you as
without
well.
a doubt. Without a doubt.
Not to talk to the quality of the film either way, but it is something that, like, there are films I saw as a kid that I like, that I know now if I watch them, I still like them, but if you critically analyze them, they fall to pieces. I'm not saying this is one of those films, but nostalgia is a very powerful thing.
It's a powerful thing, and it's a thing that I abide by, not just for Marathon Man, but because there are other, obviously, as we all know, as film fans and cinephiles, there are numerous other genres, and I can wholeheartedly admit to both of you that other genres besides the spy genre, the favorites that I hold in those other genres, I've probably seen those pictures like Marathon Man close to 30 times also. So yes, absolutely, Scott. Nostalgia has an enormous amount to do with it, to what makes one, I think, partial to the movies that become the films of one's life. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear you're a genuine Marathon fan.
Oh. Ooh.
What I love is that might have been the first time that someone's ever made that pun, and that someone's ever heard that pun, and that they are really enjoying it somewhere in the world. Someone's like, "That's great, that's good stuff." So yeah, you're welcome, whoever you are.
Inside a lunatic asylum.
Like, Marathon fan.
Marathon fan.
What's my time today? Yeah. Well, okay. Let's set the pace. Let's get the run started. Cam, why don't you lead us off?
Yes. So in terms of the behind the scenes, as Steve said, this was based on William Goldman's 1974 novel, which the rights were snapped up almost immediately by Paramount, and the film was going to be produced by Robert Evans, who was coming off of The Godfather, and actually referred to the book as the best thing he'd read since The Godfather, which I don't know if that's a backhanded compliment, because The Godfather book is not regarded as a classic of the literary form.
No.
I have no opinion on the book, but it can't be that bad if it spawned the film.
Well, it's a little bit like the book Jaws. Like, it's kind of a pulpy novel that they turned into something much more grand.
Are we talking about Puzo's novel, The Godfather?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm in total agreement with you there.
Yeah. So, nonetheless, it really wowed Robert Evans. Maybe he just saw the cinematic potential ultimately.
Right.
Maybe that's what he's really referring to.
Sure.
Mhm.
But so William Goldman, famous writer, and he co-wrote the Steve McQueen, Jackie Gleason vehicle Soldier in the Rain in 1963. That's sort of his coming out party. Then he does the 1966 Paul Newman film Harper. Wins an Oscar a couple years later for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And then he teams up with Robert Redford and does The Great Waldo Pepper and All the President's Men, which obviously co-stars Dustin Hoffman. He wins his second Oscar for President's Men.
Yep.
And then he rolls right from that film into Marathon Man. And in the future, he would write films like The Princess Bride. He would adapt Stephen King's Misery, the Mel Gibson film Maverick, which was an adaptation of the TV show. And he, most importantly, though, in terms of the world of film, perhaps outside of the films that he wrote that are so important, but he wrote a book called Adventures in the Screen Trade in 1983, which was very much sort of his lessons for aspiring screenwriters. And that book is considered like the Bible for screenwriters who want to learn the craft to this day.
It absolutely is. I mean, I own the book, and it's, dare I say, there is a caustic wit there, and there is more than just a slight degree of cynicism to the way he parlays his anecdotes and information to you, but fundamentally the Bible to not only learning craft, but understanding the minutia behind maneuvering screenplays through the industry and simply getting your material read, it's essential. It's an absolutely, it's a, like all of his novels and like his film work. I mean, I think I'm being a little bit over obvious here in my praise for him that I really revere the guy, but I believe it's an essential tool for anybody that even presumes to attempt the craft of screenwriting. It's vital.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Stephen King's On Writing, which is now something that writers immediately flock to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Clearly, we didn't pick up the book on podcasting, Cam.
Still waiting to be written, Scott. Still waiting.
Oh, it's down to us, is it?
Well, you get started on it. Let me
Okay.
know when you finish a draft or two. So Goldman was paid $500,000 to write this film, but he got a substantial back-end deal on it, so he did just fine. And directing the film, John Schlesinger, English director, who started out as an actor in the 40s and 50s. Scott went, wow, what?
I only learnt he was British today watching an interview with him, and he is the most, or was the most soft-spoken
Absolutely.
British man you could ever have.
Yes.
He had the proper received pronunciation. Oh, yes, Laurence Olivier, what a darling. Blah, 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 blah. I was like, oh, wow. I had him as like a chain-smoking like New Yorker in my head.
He is someone who made such distinct American films, and
Yes.
yet, yeah, British, and started out in the early 50s. He did a horror short called The Starfish, and in 1962 had his first major film, which was the mother-in-law thriller, A Kind of Loving.
Mhm.
And
Wait,
then
what?
in the 60s, I don't know, Scott, I don't know.
Just unpack that a little bit with me. The mother-in-law thriller called?
A Kind of Loving.
Yeah.
What kind of loving are you having with your mother-in-law? Is that why it's a thriller?
Well, perhaps so.
You know, Scott, it really plays. We're talking about Marathon Man today, but I'll confess to both you guys, I'm actually a Schlesinger completist, and I have all of his films. That movie,
That's awesome.
that movie really is what I would call more like a kitchen sink drama, more
yeah.
along the lines of early British films from the British New Wave, like Look Back in Anger and The Entertainer and Night Must Fall. This falls in that realm. It's curious. Until Cam mentioned it right now, I never even purported that there were any thriller elements to that film. It's more of a domestic drama, but what it has that all of Schlesinger's movies have, it has an extremely hard edge because he tends to have a very unflinching, but I think a very honest viewpoint on humanity and interrelationships and things like that, which is why I think, well, we'll get to it when we get to like favorite scenes, why I think Marathon Man, despite not really being in his traditional wheelhouse, is as much a Schlesinger movie as any of his films. But yeah.
Ironically, my mother-in-law looks back in anger.
And forward.
Thank you.
And in the 1960s, Schlesinger did a couple Julie Christie films that were very acclaimed, Billy Liar and Darling, the latter of which got an Oscar nomination for Best Picture. And then he closes out the 60s with Midnight Cowboy, which is a massive deal. Dustin Hoffman co-stars, wins Best Picture, and just continues to do really interesting things. In 75, he does The Day of the Locust, which rolls right into Marathon Man. That's his follow-up. But, Scott, we have tackled one of his films in the past. Do you know which one it was?
The name is on the tip of my tongue. I cannot
from
form it.
1985.
Falcon and the Snowman?
That's correct, yes.
Right.
There you go.
It was in the back of my mind. Tim Hutton.
There it is.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sean Penn.
Yeah.
And I remember me not understanding what the term snowman meant.
But since you've learned
But since
thoroughly,
you've seen the film, yeah, exactly.
It's been a flurry of knowledge since then.
Right.
Anyway, keep going.
So some production notes on this one. Laurence Olivier was who they wanted for the villain role in this as Cell. But he had serious health issues.
Yeah.
He was suffering from thrombosis and degenerative muscle disorder, and was taking a lot of painkillers. And everyone who worked on this film said he seemed on death's door. He would live until 1989, but he was going through a very, very rough period of time here, and was actually looking to get his finances in order for the end of his life, and which was a reason he took this film and wanted this film.
Yeah.
But like the producers were like, I don't think this guy's going to make it. So they actually had Richard Widmark read for the role, who was a kind of tough guy, noir actor, really fabulous actor. But they did go with Olivier, and it obviously worked out great.
Oh, absolutely.
Very, very tough time shooting this movie. They would say that like he almost had to be like almost propped up in scenes at times.
You can't tell.
No, you really can't.
No, you cannot. But there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. But I don't want to spill everything right now. We'll get to that. There's a reason why he seemed so robust and adrenalized and energized through this film, and it has very much to do with the work ethic that he had throughout his entire career as, I think, probably the greatest British stage actor that ever was, and certainly I think close to maybe the greatest British film actor there was, at least top 3. Again, I'm kind of like throwing roses and revering everybody that's involved with this film. I know I'm like very little to complain about, but I mean, when you're talking about Olivier in the company of other actors that were considered for this part, as much as I love Widmark and he's a terrific actor, when I consider this film and I consider the Zell role, and I contemplate the possibility of seeing Widmark play that part as opposed to Olivier, it just I can't fathom it. I think he just played the part flawlessly.
Yeah, there's like a gravitas he has that's just about unmatched among any actor, much less Widmark.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's interesting about this movie is like kind of the lore that came out of it, and how accurate it all is seems to be very mixed up, but the relationship between Dustin Hoffman and Olivier. There was a lot of talk at the time that these two were clashing a lot because Dustin Hoffman was very method actor and Olivier was not, and would get very frustrated because Dustin would decide, let's improv. And that is not something Olivier was particularly well suited to or comfortable doing. And so there was a lot of talk about that. Plus, one of the most famous anecdotes really in Hollywood history was Dustin Hoffman showing up. He'd stayed up for 2 days, was exhausted, saying he was trying to get into the headspace of his character. And Olivier responded, "My dear boy, you look awful. Why don't you try acting?"
Exactly.
And that story, that like little anecdote, has been reprinted over and over and over into Hollywood legend. Dustin Hoffman has denied this story and said that Olivier knew exactly why he was exhausted. He'd been spending a lot of time at Studio 54, and he was joking. But joke or not, this has lived on.
Oh yeah.
Was he the original snowman?
He might have been in that time period, Scott. I think they all were in this time period, except Olivier. So, yeah, and, there are interviews where Dustin Hoffman has talked about him very warmly.
Oh,
so,
absolutely.
I don't know. Up for debate. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, their stylistic differences notwithstanding to their craft, I mean, it came to pass that as production was reaching its conclusion on the picture, that they became extremely attached to one another. And, Hoffman idolized, he deified Olivier, as rightfully so, and Scheider did also. I mean, the fact of the matter is that they called him Lord on set when they were making the picture. And there's a lot of great, I don't mean to be doing irrelevant plugs here, but there's a lot of great anecdotes that can be that can really be treasured and savored in the book that I think is the definitive book on the life and work of John Schlesinger. It's called Edge of Midnight. It's called Edge of Midnight: The Life of John Schlesinger. The writer's name is William Mann, and I made it a point to get this book a few years ago. And it's there are books on Schlesinger besides this, but this is really the definitive one, the one most worth having. And there's a couple of chapters dedicated to Marathon Man alone. Not because it was a contentious shoot. I mean, really wasn't for the most part, but because there was just so much to do with, corralling these two and making them seem eye to eye. Like you said, Cam, it was a little bit strained at first because they were attacking their roles with equal amounts of vigor, but just different methods behind them. But eventually it all came to pass that they saw eye to eye. And I really think that there was a kind of love, a very loving relationship that developed between the two of them that one can see in the behind the scenes of it's on the DVD actually and the Blu-ray, the behind the scenes that was the not the retrospective, but the behind the scenes that was done right after the making of the film in '76, where they're celebrating the rap party, and you can see them toasting one another, and it gets quite emotional actually.
I have to check that out actually.
Yeah.
Couple other notes. The sequences with Scheider in Paris, they were originally going to use London, but ended up switching to Paris. And also, this was the second film to utilize the Steadicam, which was invented by Garrett Brown, but the first one to actually hit theaters. It was the first film to use it was the Woody Guthrie biopic Bound for Glory, which was a Best Picture nominee that year. But Marathon Man ran ahead. It made it to theaters, so that was the first time audiences had seen a Steadicam really in a film.
Right.
And the movie had a budget of $6.5 million. Domestically, it did $28.2. International, who knows? Those numbers are hard to find. The top three for the year. Number 1 was Rocky. Number 2 was To Fly, which was an aerial tour of America from a balloon ascension in the 1800s to a venture into space. Kind of like what we would look at now as like kind of like one of those IMAX kind of nature kind of documentary things.
I just share a personal anecdote with you guys about the film's release in '76.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me you had a personal anecdote about To Fly, and I was so excited.
I popped up for it there. I thought you were going to give us a real To Fly.
Well, I was just going to say that there are very few films, at least I haven't, maybe I'm not seeing the right films, but there are very few theatrical experiences that one has in their lifetime where you remember. I can honestly say, even though I was almost 5, this was at it was either the Village Theater or the National Theater in Westwood. It was one of those two. But I will say that when we saw this early screening of Marathon Man, just prior to its release, there was not a single, and I don't know about you guys, maybe you've had more of these experiences than me, but when we saw it there, and the Village and the National Theater in Westwood, they're enormous, enormous houses. There was not a single seat available. Why I remember this, I don't know. I mean, this was decades ago in my lifetime, but I do remember it. And I only say it because for some strange reason, I mean, I've seen a lot of, I guess what you'd call big pictures, event pictures in the cinema in my lifetime, but I haven't seen that many where when I went to the show that there literally wasn't a single seat available. But Marathon Man, for some crazy reason, was one of, I'm going to say maybe 10, maybe a dozen, maybe a dozen at the most, films in my lifetime that I've seen that when I went to see them in the cinema, there wasn't not a single seat available.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see what the rooms for To Fly were in comparison. And number 3 for that year was A Star Is Born, the Streisand version. And just the last note, this was nominated for 1 Oscar, supporting actor for Laurence Olivier. Yeah. And the other nominees were Jason Robards for All the President's Men, Ned Beatty for Network, Burgess Meredith for Rocky, and Burt Young for Rocky. That's a very strong lineup. And
It is, but what an interesting Goldman connection there, that the gentleman that actually won that year was Robards, and it was
Yep.
for a picture.
Mm-hmm.
Is it safe?
Uh-oh.
I knew that was going to come up at some point. There was no way we were going to get through this without that being.
Steve.
Yeah.
Is it safe?
What is Scott? What does the it refer to?
I'm not too sure. At one point, I was convinced it was code. At another point, I was convinced he was just losing his marbles. At this point, yeah, I don't know.
That scene is played so beautifully, and it's played, I think it's meant to be terrifying, but for all the number of times I've seen the film, I actually see the scene as being very darkly comic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know it's not meant to be funny, because God knows Hoffman is about to have a very bad day, a very bad day. But that double speak that's going on in that sequence, it's very much present in the book, and the kind of back and forth that, I think Dustin first says to him, "I'm sorry, are you talking to me?" And then he says it again. And then he says, "Is what safe?" And then again, and he says, "What does the it refer to?" And then I think it goes like, no, it's not safe. It's very dangerous. Be careful. All the back and forth and all the answers and the positing of the question, the fact that it becomes a point of, I'm going to say, slight comic relief, is only because all of the code and doublespeak is meant to be very vague and nebulous. Because at the end of the day, as we know, again, no spoilers, it's all about the diamonds. It's all about the diamonds. At the end of the day, that's really what it's all about.
And I think the comedy actually comes also from Dustin Hoffman's reactions.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
I mean, at first being like, yeah, it's all good. And then like reversing it too. No, it's not. No, it's not. Like, you can tell he'll say anything to try to get himself out of it. But there's something about that. They would never shoot the scene the same way now. There's something about that 1970s energy they would channel into performances and filmmaking that it feels so real.
Yes.
But it also feels like someone just trying anything on a spot that they really are not trained to do. Like, they have no background in how to even navigate a situation like this.
Exactly right. Yep.
Well, Steve, this is your moment. All eyes are on you. You've brought us this film. You are its champion. Why don't you sprint on ahead and tell us what you really think about Marathon Man?
I think that the fact that the film is descending on it'll be next year, its 50-year anniversary, I think is what makes the picture stand out, is that, in my opinion, and again, this is all just, relative, it's just my POV, I think what it does, and what Goldman did so brilliantly, both in the novel and in the film adaptation, and it's why it works so well, is that he took a lot of the conventions and tropes that had been established so firmly in spy cinema throughout the 60s, yes, in the Bond pictures, but also even in, comical Bond riffs like the Helm movies and the Flint movies. And he basically just sort of like capsized them. And he basically said, well, I'm not going to do this obtrusively or mockingly, but I think that there's a way of sort of like spinning all the expectations of the genre and creating a narrative that will seem fresh, while at the same time exploring a piece of human history that's not, let's face it, it's not terribly pleasant. But I don't think that the whole device and notion of Nazism and the way that sort of plays its role and invests the narrative, I think, with a certain intensity and gravitas, I don't think, nor have I ever thought, that that's really Marathon Man's central goal. I think that its central goal has always been to compel and to suspend disbelief in a great way, and to do it in a manner that basically says, look at this very seemingly benevolent, nebbishy, you can say, about Hoffman's character protagonist. Look at how we're going to put him through the ringer, but we're going to create in the process a very unconventional type of protagonist slash action hero that is most unexpected and refreshing for this genre, the likes of which at that time I don't think had really ever been seen to that effect and to that extent. But I think ultimately, I'll tell you guys really what balances the film and what makes it as great as it is, in my opinion. And I say this all the time to people with whom I have very elaborate discussions with about this movie, and it explains why I love Brothers so much. The follow-up book that I told you guys to, I recommend that you guys read.
Yeah.
I really consider Scylla, the Scheider character, he is for me the hero of this movie, which is why when Scheider leaves the film, not only is it a very painful death, and it is, but a little bit it's a little bit of a challenge to endure the notion of continuing the narrative without Scheider being involved. And I think that has a great deal to do, in fact, I know it does, with why Goldman felt compelled to write Brothers. Because I don't think from his standpoint, he wasn't done with the Scylla character, not by a long shot. But, for cinematic purposes, and again, filmic translation, he has to die in the film. But I think it's that combination of the original approach to the spy genre that I think Goldman invested with every fiber of his being to make it distinctive, to make it very darkly comic, which I thought was great. And just to give us, again, a protagonist, and I guess you'll call him a sub-protagonist, that being the Scylla character, that I think just makes it invigorates the genre in a way that, there are few films, spy films, that were made afterwards that I can honestly say approach the genre where the conventions and the tropes are concerned in a manner that was as distinctive and as memorable as Marathon Man was. But again, this is just my POV, but I'm giving it to you guys from the heart the way I feel. So that's pretty much it.
I mean, it's hard to follow that up.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, because I'm sure me and Cam will have different takes on it, but it's clear this is coming from someone who has thought about this film quite a lot, and obviously made its impression upon you as a 4/5-year-old all the way back then. I do wonder how you got on with dentists in your younger years.
Great question though, Scott. I love that you asked that, because I'll tell you something, if it's any consolation or if it even makes a damn bit of difference, I loved my dentist growing up. Some of the nicest doctors I ever had in my life. So the Marathon Man connection notwithstanding, I I never had any problems.
I like to think at the end of every session, you would just say, "Are they safe? Are they safe? Are they safe?"
Right. Oh, man.
Cam, why don't you chuck in your 2 cents?
So I love this film. I think it does. When I'm looking at spy films on the show, it's so often that they kind of fall into a formula where I go, oh, okay, this one's a good example, this one's a bad, but like there's recognizable elements that you go, okay, seen this kind of thing before. And what I love about Marathon Man is it does feel so unique. There's not really another movie like Marathon Man. And a big part of the appeal to me is the way it's just expert balancing of the thriller elements, which I think are incredibly effective.
Mm-hmm.
Like they are staged in ways I've never really seen done since or before. Like you think of a scene like Dustin Hoffman in the bathtub where the guys just start breaking through the door quietly. And I'm like, this is so unbelievably tense, real. It feels so raw, and there's no sequence like it. And it's not like a high-tech thing. It's not like they had to imagine some sort of elaborate CG creation. It's just like a crowbar going through the side of a door. and it's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of moments like that I might touch on when we get to likes, but to me, it's the ability to balance a thriller that keeps me on the edge of my seat with the weightier themes of people damaged by history. And you have Dustin Hoffman grappling with what McCarthyism did to his father. And then you also have everything to do with Zell, the horrors of the Holocaust, the way that, like, it's something I never really thought about when I looked at a 1970s film where they would acknowledge the Holocaust, but it would be very fresh. This is like 30 years after the end of World War II. And so you have right off the top a sequence some could look at as comic, where it's the two men just like fighting in their cars, which leads to like a huge, fireball. But like, it's like that messiness is just in the streets. People are surrounded by it daily. When Zell is walking down the street and that woman sees him, that horror is being brought back. This is just not a character from the long past. This is someone she recognizes from 30 years ago, which really isn't in the scheme of things very far. And I feel like the movie actually does an incredible job tackling that material without making it feel exploitive, which is really hard to do when you're basing the villain on, Mengele.
Exactly.
Obviously, the horror doctor of Auschwitz who escaped and, basically lived a life in South America. That is a hard thing to do, and I think so many movies could attempt that, and they would be lambasted for it and considered incredibly insensitive. And I feel like this movie somehow makes it all work in a way where, like, there's so many, like, little subtleties. When I look at the scene where Dustin Hoffman at the end is forcing him to eat the diamonds, I immediately am thinking of the fact that, like, Jewish people, when they were being put into ghettos or when the ghettos were being liquidated, were eating their jewelry, their wedding rings, to keep them away from the hands of the Nazis, things like that. The movie does not spell it out. Dustin Hoffman does not say something like, I'm going to do to you what, you did to my people, or something like that. It keeps it entirely there. You can look at it on a surface level, thriller level, but I think there's so much depth and things to read into the entire course of the movie that's what makes it such a pleasure, is you could just be on the edge of your seat and watch a 2-hour thrilling film in the very 70s mold, or you can dig deeper and find so many riches. And I think that really rewards the rewatches that I'm sure, Steve, you've, as you said, had 30 plus of.
Oh yeah. Yeah. This is the type of film where I find new nuances and subtleties with every repeat viewing, because I think that was the intention when Goldman and Schlesinger combined forces in the development of the picture. It's like the type of film that reaps rewards when you revisit it, because you say to yourself, oh, there's something that I think was kind of like buried there. It's a little nugget that I hadn't noticed last time around, but it's there this time. Always very subtly presented. As you say, Cam, and I agree, it is the fact that you can watch this picture, distill it and dissect it. And if you want to read into that deeper subtext, you can do that. And it would work. It would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many scenes that I noticed of characters, like, something's happening and there's just people around watching them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just these passive observers, like intense things are happening and they're just watching.
Mm-hmm.
And it just adds this level of intensity in the film, but also you think of these experiences that were happening, whether it's the Holocaust, whether it was McCarthyism, and how many people were just like watching it happen, but what could they really do?
That's exactly right.
It would almost be low-hanging fruit for me to swoop in right now and be like, worst film ever. Like that. It's not even that funny, really, truth be told.
And I thought the chairman was bad.
Wacka wacka. Where's Gregory Peck when you need him, eh? I could really do with a fence to crawl under right now. No, this is cinema that goes beyond just cinema. This is high art. This is a convergence of filmmakers and actors, people working at the top of their game. And you talk about things like Laurence Olivier being in bad health. You can't tell. He's putting everything he has on the screen, as is Dustin Hoffman. He's, staying up for 3 days to give you a very real performance in that moment. This is something that, as Cam said, you're right, you could probably write a thesis about this film. You could do a lot of academic study of this film, or you could just watch it for what it is, which is a really good thriller.
Mhm.
It holds your attention from beginning to end, and it's one of those films where you've clicked play if you're watching it at home, or the curtains just opened at the cinema and it's just starting to play for you, and you blink and you're like, oh, it's the credits.
Yeah.
Like you just become part of the film and you're
Right.
drawn into it for the whole process. And yeah, we'll talk about things that we like and maybe don't like down the road in this discussion, but I find it hard to think that there are many things we can criticize about something that I would consider to be a masterpiece. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think it's a word that I don't bandy about freely or frequently, and it's a word that, in total agreement with you, Scott, I have to say is entirely applicable to this movie. Um, it has, for reasons I can't quite fathom, because they tend to be historians and critics who I do admire and to a certain degree even respect, but that the film throughout the decades has shown itself to be moderately divisive
Mm-hmm.
is something that to this day I cannot fathom. I mean, it has its champions, like we three clearly are, but there are people also like Pauline Kael, a very prominent critic in her day, who was not crazy about this movie. Um, I don't understand why. But then again, there are other prominent historians and critics like Roger Ebert, who thought the world of this film, thought very highly of it. So again, I we're certainly not alone in our sentiments, but I mean, just to kind of like commend you for throwing it out there, Scott, because none of us had the verve or the audacity to say it. But at the end of the day, where cinema and where this genre is concerned, it most certainly is a masterpiece. There's no doubt about it.
It's one of those things like I'm conscious when I'm having these discussions sometimes of the fact that we're having a discussion on a podcast that thousands of people are listening to and hopefully agreeing or disagreeing and conversing with. And, is it interesting to have a conversation where 3 people, 4 people, 2 people, whatever, all agree?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're all just like, this is great. I think it's great too. We all think it's great. I swept all that aside because frankly, I don't see people talking about this film all that much, and I think they should be. I think this is one I'm glad we're talking about, and I'm glad we're sort of inspecting as we do through the lens of SpyHards. And I just, I was absolutely bowled over with it, and I've got so many things to say about it, and I don't know if I'll do it justice. That's actually what worries me more.
Well,
I noticed though, like, critics were polarized on it at the time of
yes,
its release.
absolutely.
But
Right.
if you check out Letterboxd now, it's rated quite highly.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's one that like maybe was a little too raw, maybe for people even
At the time, right.
but is something that's very appreciated. Obviously, the Seinfeld writers really loved it.
Right.
And it's funny, like Cam, you mentioned about the whole like the observer effect
Yeah.
thing. It's not something I even picked up on, but when you said it, it kind of came to my mind. And then, like, that's something that still has social cachet now, relevancy now. My wife, Hannah, you know them all, listeners. You know my wife, Hannah. You know very well. But she was at the train station the other day, and there was someone on the train tracks. This was rush hour. There were about 40 people on the train, like on the side waiting for the train. No one was helping him. Hannah had to help, whilst grown men stood there and watched, some with their phones out. And you just think like,
Yeah.
there's sort of like it's this funny thing where you like don't feel like you can get involved and you're sort of watching. So I'm just bringing it up because it's interesting that you mentioned it, Cam, and it happened so recently to Hannah, not myself. But like, that's a real thing. People will just stand there and watch horrific things in front of them happen, not feeling like they have any agency to control it.
Well, I mean, look at the scene where Zell is walking down the street and that woman is screaming like it's
Right.
him. Someone grab him. Not a single person moves.
Exactly.
The only person that approaches him is the guy who actually recognized him from earlier. But that's someone who's actually involved in an actual experience with him.
Right.
It's not a random passerby.
Yeah. Well, let's get into likes, because it sounds like we've all got a lot. So maybe let's make it interesting and limit it to one thing each.
Okay.
You can espouse all you want, but you got to pick the one thing that's the top of your list.
Okay. Well, honestly, that's borderline impossible, but I am going to try to distill it. And maybe I'll figure out a way to have it dovetail into what it connects to. But yeah, I guess you could say they're part of a sustained set piece. Mine is, I think the popular choices, I don't know what you guys thought, but well, we'll hear it soon. The popular choices for everybody always seems to be going to the initial confrontation, the tete-a-tete between Dustin and Olivier that ends up culminating in the infamous dental scene. As marvelously written and played and directed as that scene is, again, I think the reason I can't point to that scene for myself is because I see it as a very typically Goldman-esque, subversive moment of dark humor. So that won't be it. So I'll point to this as my perhaps favorite sequence in the film. And it's an odd choice because it's a smaller moment. The opera house meeting that Scheider's character is supposed to have with the Leclerc character.
Yeah.
That has layers of happenings that culminate into what I consider to be the great fight with the albino assassin. Now, so I'm going to use it like that. I am going to look at it as a sustained sequence that is very, very intimately linked to its pieces. You know, the way Scheider arrives to the opera house, finds Leclerc dead, garroted, of course, and we end up finding that garrote becomes very important later on.
Yeah.
And then what I thought was absolutely so ingenious, and again, it's a Goldman thing. It's the way he was trying to get Nicole's attention after the opera. And then he watches her disappear, just gradually receding into the darkness. And then across the stone walkway, you see the soccer ball. And the soccer ball just drops into frame. You didn't see who threw it. The soccer ball just drops into frame, and Schlesinger's camera just sort of follows it as it rolls away. And I think that ball, that soccer ball, becomes, I think, kind of a metaphorical symbol for what is the very unforgiving game of international espionage. What does a soccer ball represent if not a totem for what is to become a game? And a very unforgiving game at that, a ruthless one. And then when that suddenly dissolves, if you go from that sequence to the next one, it doesn't cut to the hotel. It dissolves to Scheider. And again, I love the little misdirection that Schlesinger gives you when we cut to the interior of Scheider's hotel room and you hear like the panting. And that panting could be misconstrued for like bawling or, you know, somebody getting off, he's screwing somebody. And then as he pans over, actually, no, he's doing push-ups. He's doing push-ups. And so that misdirection, of course, leads us to the fight. Now, so it's the fight, opera house, I think, linked moment that is my favorite scene. Now, the fight, why is it important? Because it's so layered. We see the albino attack Scheider from behind, cuts the hand, the blood sprays everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Very effective.
Very effective. And I love the way the blood flies onto the curtain. Why?
Yeah.
Because the old man who's sitting across the way because of his own physical infirmity, he can't do anything, but he's seeing it. He's watching it happen, and his caregiver's standing right behind him. What the fuck can they do? Nothing. Their hands are completely tied, but he knows that some heavy shit is going down. Now, when we cut back to the fight, notice the way that that fight is choreographed and executed. Movements are very swift and economical. As you guys both know, it's not a protracted fight, not at all. But we can see that Scheider and the albino are unbelievably skilled and efficient. And I think, and I don't want to get too garish and gruesome here, but if we're going to talk about kills, I do like the originality that was invested in the way that Scheider eliminated the albino. Because if you remember the move correctly, he pins him to the ground, puts his knee on his back, takes his chin in both hands, and then just snaps the neck backwards. And that's that. Very efficient. I'm not fucking around with you. We're not going to do this, kind of extended dance of martial arts. Not going to do it. And guys, I want to leave you with this one footnote, because there you just heard my favorite set piece sequence in the film. But here's a great behind the scenes story behind it. That fight initially was supposed to be a very sort of elaborately choreographed, martial arts imbued fight sequence. That what happened was this. Scheider tells the story in the documentary. Cam, you can actually see it on the DVD. The story that Scheider tells is that when they came back from lunch, he got to set and he got to location. He saw these two stuntmen jumping around the sofas, flipping each other over the bed, doing judo turns against the walls. And he looked over at Schlesinger and he's like, John, what's going on here? What is this? And he goes, no, it's just that, I want this fight between, you and the assassin to be incredibly dynamic. I just want to do something special here. And then Scheider, I love the fact that he fought for his point of view and he got his way. And I love that, because Scheider said, John, I don't think that two assassins of this level of experience and skill would be doing this sort of like karate dance. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
They would be much swifter, much more economical, and ultimately much more lethal and sparing in their movements. We actually came up with something. Let us show you what we've done. And the gentleman whose name was James Wing Woo, the actor who played the albino assassin, he actually came from the world of stunts. He was a stuntman. And so he and Scheider already had a certain degree of experience with action from, French Connection and Seven Ups and certainly Jaws, which all preceded this film. So Scheider had his ideas as well about how to, execute that fight scene with a degree of originality that hadn't been seen. And so it's crazy to think, you guys, that Bond fanatics that we all are, that isn't it crazy to think that so many of the Bond pictures that have very extended one-on-one fist fights, such as Connery and Shaw in the Orient Express in Russia, and Pierce and Sean Bean at the end of GoldenEye. There are others.
Yeah.
But isn't it crazy to think that as great as an extended one-on-one fight like that can be, a fight that is as brief and as short and as lethal as this can be equally rewarding. So there you have it.
And I love that shot of the assassin coming up behind him through the
Yes.
curtain, where you see the face. Like there's so many shots in this movie that are just that beautiful, where you go like, wow, incredible stuff. The doll opening its eyes, the bomb thing late, earlier, incredible. But what I love about that fight is it has some elements that reminded me a little bit of 3 Days of the Condor.
Little
we
bit.
have Robert Redford fighting the mailman assassin. Though in that case, like, Robert Redford isn't necessarily as trained as a fighter as Scheider is in this movie, but it's like the desperation of it and the messiness of it, where it feels real. And the way his hand is cut, where you see like the blood spurt out from the wire cutting through it,
right?
That kind of enters a zone that's different than most fight scenes, where there's something very orchestrated about blood or gore in an action scene, and that just feels messy and gross and inconvenient too. It's really getting in the way of him actually fighting, and it's those kind of touches that I think they're throughout this film, but that sequence is incredible for that.
Well, there's also like a sense of, let's look at things from a professional wrestling standpoint for a second. There's a storytelling point of view here. He gets his hand chopped, and then he goes to judo chop the guy, and his hand hurts, and he's like, like you wouldn't see, like Bond would do a massive fall, hurt his leg, and then sprint off. He's a superhero.
Look at The World Is Not Enough, right? The hurt shoulder.
Right, exactly. The shoulder thing, yeah. Whereas here there was an action and a consequence, and it doesn't have to it doesn't have to have a cut, like a shot to him going like, "Oh, my hand." It's you see the hand get hurt, and then you see the sort of consequence of that. It treats the audience as not an idiot.
Exactly right.
Cam, what about you?
I'm gonna say, because I'm gonna lump them together.
Well, you're all cheating at this game.
You're all cheating. Well, it's the villains of this film, and Olivier as Zell is just the perfect depiction of the mundanity of evil, where just by connecting the dots as to what the actual Mengele did in the Holocaust, you go, like, this is the worst of the worst. And everything this guy is capable of, you think of like this monster. And he plays him as just so flat, unassuming.
Yes.
A guy who can like walk through the streets, go into like jewelry places, ask about diamonds. Seems, as you said, Scott, like meek, like he's kind of like hiding himself. He's nervous. He's very human, and it's stripping away that level of impenetrable evil that we often assign to these people and saying like, this dude is like a 60-year-old man who's like scared of being caught, and all he wants is to protect his diamonds. It's like greed and just fear of being caught.
Right.
He's terrifying when you see him in his own comfortable atmosphere, like torturing Dustin Hoffman. In that moment, he's in control. He is in for him, a safe place to do this. But throw him out in the real world, he's just a guy, and not a special one either. And I think like they find a really good way to get that across in a way that doesn't strip away his menace. When you see him opposite Dustin Hoffman at the end of the film, he's still dangerous. And I got to give some love to William Devane.
Outstanding.
Who I think is incredible in this movie.
Outstanding.
Like, he's going to be so overshadowed when you talk about this movie because of Olivier. But William Devane as the, secret agent who's switching sides and trying to manipulate Dustin Hoffman has a scene where he rescues him, quote unquote, with the blanks and the fake knife.
Totally bogus. Yes.
Yeah. And then just drives him around basically the block, drops him back off in front.
Right.
That is a character that like we've seen these kind of like, rogue agents or unreliable agents that, screw people over in spy films.
Yes.
But there's something about like the sneer of William Devane, the sweater game the man has going on. There's something about him that just, I've seen William Devane in so many things. He was one of those actors who was very reliable, even in things like, the Bad News Bears and Break in Training.
Yes.
But not someone who really ever became a star. But he did a movie called Rolling Thunder, where he played a Vietnam vet.
Which is awesome. Awesome film.
Yes. It's like a vigilante film where he was a Vietnam vet.
He goes around the picture basically doling out rough justice after one of his hands has been put into a garbage disposal.
Yeah.
And that missing hand becomes a hook. It's awesome. Yeah.
He is bringing that kind of intensity and very like low level menace where he's smiling. He seems approachable.
Right.
He seems like a guy, when he goes to Dustin Hoffman and says, look, I know, that that you're in trouble. I'm sorry about your brother. I was a friend of his. Like you, for some reason, feel like you can trust him, even though he has that Cheshire Cat grin and he's entirely unreliable.
Right. He's utterly conniving. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he's great. And his big comeuppance, shooting the two goons. One of the goons, of course, the guy from a couple Bond films where he played a gangster.
Marc Laurence.
He's in Goldfinger and Diamonds Are Forever. Yeah.
Yeah.
shoots both of them, and then also shoots Marthe Keller, who, by the way, was actually up for the Triple X role in The Spy Who Loved Me back in the day.
I could see that.
I did not know that. Was she really?
Yeah. Yeah, she was. Yeah, one of the people up for it.
Well, you know what? Just to jump on the Mark Keller thing for a minute, you guys may or may not know that, again, in the world of spy films and in the world of Robert Evans, she followed this film up immediately with a great John Frankenheimer directed film that's kind of spy-ish called Black Sunday, where Robert Shaw was the lead. And her character in that is, I must say, not unlike her character on Marathon Man. They're these Matahari deceivers that you don't see coming. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and I like that scene where you have Devane like shoot her, and he's just like relentless. In a way, he's actually in some ways more dangerous than Olivier because he is relentless and he doesn't stop. Whereas Olivier, you gotta give him the right circumstances for him to be dangerous. Whereas Devane's, you get the sense there's Devanes everywhere, in this intelligence community, and they're the ones that are really, really scary.
Agreed. Yep.
I'm glad you guys covered a lot of the things I had for likes, because mine is slightly different, and it's more of an overall point as opposed to a scene or a character. And that is the mood and aesthetic and cinematography of this film. It creates a character of New York. It definitely sets its location. I wrote down one of my notes just as sort of my brain just spitting things out as I saw the film was Taxi Driver meets Parallax View, and just and I'm absolutely on board for that sort of a combination. If those two films had a child, I would be its godparent if it would take me aboard. It's a wonderful combination, and I just think from just the griminess of Hoffman's apartment, just the filth, and we've all been there.
Yeah,
I live in that. I'm going to Cam's apartment at some point this year, and I'm sure I will be seeing the same thing.
I I thought of the baggage handler strike scene too.
Yeah,
where they, it's Zell coming from the plane, and it just has to get his bags, and it's like, who thought of that?
I bet that's a real thing that happened.
Probably was, but him picking through his bags on the tarmac, I'm like, what a brilliant stroke to just add to this movie.
Yeah, and when he gets away from the sort of dental torture and he's running just the streets with his shirt basically off and he's jumping around the freeway and things like that, he just feels like a desperate man. And there's a claustrophobic feel to the city. There's a sweatiness to everyone in this film. Everyone's got a little bit of a dampness to them. I just love the vibe of it, and I'm not a big vibes person. I remember even our Spectre review years ago, I remember being a bit anti-vibes because it sort of lacks any real anything interesting to say. You just say the film is vibes, but this film has a particular vibe to it. It is really quite visceral at times, and you can talk about the blood, you can talk about the effects and stuff, but I remember just watching this film and feeling that city. And even when you're down in the sewers at the end, and it's despite it being this quite ornate looking set, it still felt like filth everywhere. I mean, you were standing next to human waste, so maybe it's partly that.
Partly
that. Laurence Olivier was playing human waste as well. So there's also that.
Yeah, right. I think of that scene where Hoffman is trying to get away towards the back half of the movie and climbs up that mountain of dirt or debris.
Yeah. Yes.
And Devane goes up after him and isn't able to catch him. You don't see a lot of movies where a character goes up a mountain of just what looks like filth. That's just not something. It's not, movies tend to be a little more clean nowadays. This feels so 70s.
You can't see Chris Evans getting his fingernails dirty.
No.
Not like that. No.
I wrote down just another stream of consciousness. I said there's something elegant about the decay.
Yeah, it's a beautiful looking movie in that in the same way a lot of 70s New York movies were. They're ugly, but they're beautiful because of it.
Yeah, it's something I really was going to address in greater detail when we do kind of our closing summations, our individual closing statements on the movie, that has more to do with Schlesinger's sense of craft that he brings to really every film he's ever made. And this was no exception. One thing I'll share with you guys that I think is appropriate in lieu of the fact that we're making observations about individual favorite moments here is that when he came to this movie, he was really reeling to a large degree at what was for him the very tragic and I think unexpected debacle of the Day of the Locust.
Yeah.
And the Day of the Locust, I will tell both of you individually, though it's not a spy film, I urge you both to see the film. It is an astonishing work of art, one of the key films of the 70s, and a film that is as far removed from the world of Marathon Man as you can fathom, because the Day of the Locust is ostensibly about losers in the film industry. It's about the people that are on the fringes of the film industry who can barely carve out a living doing bullshit jobs that you wouldn't wish upon your worst enemy. But there is a sense of craft and artistry in the cinematography. By the way, no accident. Both movies, Day of the Locust and Marathon Man, were shot by Conrad Hall. So there was some continuity there. And they were both designed by Richard McDonald, the production designer. So he had the same production designer and DP going from one picture to the next. And what led him to Marathon Man ultimately after the sting, because Day of the Locust was an extremely personal project for Schlesinger that he wanted the public to respond to, but they didn't. I love it. It's one of my 3 favorites of his films. But he said in a very, very pronounced statement afterwards, and it's in the biography, after I recovered from the agony of Day of the Locust, I thought to myself how I've always loved thrillers my entire life, but up until this moment, I've never made one. I need to do something now that's out of my comfort zone, away from my wheelhouse, away from what audiences would expect me to make, and invest it with the same degree of passion and artistry that I did Day of the Locust. And I think maybe that's why, to your point, Scott, maybe that's why Marathon Man looks and feels as stunning as it does.
I'm glad that anything I say in this podcast can go through the prism of Steve, because he makes me sound better than I am.
Which is a real achievement, actually.
Yeah, because it takes a lot of work to make me sound intelligent.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Agents, we don't expect you to talk. We expect you to buy a subscription to our Patreon.
Yee. That's right. Over on the SpyHards Patreon, we're covering all your favorite spy TV shows, as well as popular films from the most iconic secret agent actors of all time.
Cam, why don't you share some intel on our latest assignment?
Well, Scott, as we enter the holiday season, what better way to give yourself a gift than by catching up with the November offerings over on the Patreon? We had class with our tribute to Robert Redford with reviews of Brubaker and Barefoot in the Park. Plus, we had some sass with the Ted Danson TV movie Once Upon a Spy, which is so unbelievably crazy you have to see it to believe it. So there's a lot to check out, and you should do it now.
So accept your mission and help support your favorite spy movie podcast at patreon.com/spyhards.
But before we activate the 4th protocol, let's get back to the spy jigs.
Hello everyone, it's me, Joel Dommett. You've heard of the BAFTAs, the Oscars, the Grammys. Well, we've got a brand new award show for you. It's our new podcast, And the Award Goes To, where each week I invite a guest to host their very own award show, dishing out 5 awards across 5 categories made just for them. From best song ever written and best meal deal combination to best feeling in the world, each week we'll hand out a fresh batch of made-up awards with some of the biggest names in comedy and entertainment choosing the winners. So join me, Joel Dommett, for And the Award Goes To, presented by Argos on all podcast apps and YouTube.
Are you one of the 1.5 million UK customers that have used MedExpress for your healthcare journey? If you're unsure as weight loss treatments are right for you, complete our online consultation to see if you are eligible for support on your weight loss journey. If eligible, treatment will be delivered safely and discreetly to you, and you'll receive ongoing personalised support every step of the way with our UK-registered clinicians. Take a step towards managing your health concerns with confidence. Visit medexpress.co.uk to learn more.
And we're back. Okay, now, it can't all be perfect. Look, we're heading towards the finish line, but I'm running out of gas. I'm not having the best time. Is there anything we can critique about this film? And I will open up with a critique myself.
Mm-hmm.
Is Dustin Hoffman supposed to be college age in this film?
Okay, there's a story behind this. Okay, so here you go. You
Steve,
open that.
Come on.
Okay, so when Hoffman was approached with the role, he was a little bit dubious at first about accepting it because, first of all, the thing about Dustin, if you look at him through the decades, through the years, he's a man that has always looked great for his age.
Mm-hmm.
He does.
Yeah.
He does not. He never has projected his age. Never. There is a constant youthfulness to his appearance. When he made Marathon Man, he was 39. Now, the first thing he said to Evans and Schlesinger was, "Bob, I want to work with you. John, I absolutely want to work with you again. But in all seriousness, guys, do you think that I can still pass for college age?" And they were like, yes, don't worry about it. And then he thought to himself and he said, well, when I did The Graduate in 1967, I'm supposed to be college age there, and I was already 30. So if they're encouraging me and telling me you did it in The Graduate, it's 9 years later, but guess what, man? You can do it again. I'll go with it. I'll do one more time at, the whole college scene. Now, to your point, Scott, I do agree with you only from the standpoint that if you're somebody who knows Hoffman's actual age when he made this film, then yes, it seems like a bit of a stretch. But in all honesty, for all the times I've seen the picture and I watch him and he's got that scene in the classroom with Fritz Weaver when he's talking to him about the history of his father and what the subject of his thesis is and all that, and they're having that very clinical discussion about scholastics. Honestly, I buy it. I don't have a problem with it.
I mean, he's at the thesis level, so he's not a freshman.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. I kind of bought it because people just tended to look older.
Yeah.
In that time period, you go back to movies and watch from the 70s, and it's like people look older than they do now.
Whatever you have to tell yourself, Cam, to get through.
Well, thank you. But it was also just like he has that kind of like restless, youthful energy.
Yes.
That I thought worked. The thing that threw me the most, honestly, was having Scheider as his brother, because I'm like, Scheider is a man. Like, that is a very masculine, manly man walking into these scenes. And I'm like, what's the age difference between these two? And I looked it up. It was 5 years.
5 years, right.
And I was like, wow, okay. Like, that was far less than I expected. I thought it was going to be like a 15-year age gap or something, just because of the difference in how they come across on screen.
Right.
But, yeah, that to me was more of the question, which was just like the difference between the two of them than how old Dustin Hoffman actually looked.
Maybe I'm just projecting my own struggles with aging.
Well, aren't we all?
Yeah, indeed. No, I'll throw it out to you, Steve. Come on. Is there anything you can critique about the film?
No, actually, listen, despite the fact that the movie is my favorite spy film of all time, there actually is, believe it or not, a I mean, it's not really not only would I classify it as a dislike, I call it a big bone of contention. And it's really
Mhm.
what Goldman's problem was. I think I sort of semi-addressed this at the outset of the conversation, but I'll just sort of punctuate it and give it a little bit more emphasis now. And it goes back to the whole Robert Town factor and what he was brought in to do, which was to revise that ending. You know, as somebody who is a devout admirer of both the film and the book and its creator, I wholly concur with Goldman that had they gone with the book's ending of having Hoffman ruthlessly gun down Zell and call it a day, cut to black, it's now very, very gray and morally ambiguous because he has become that which he has loathed and despised all of his life. It would have been such a gut punch ending that it arguably, instead of being one of the key, you know, spy films or key genre films of that decade, I think it would have been just one of the great films of that decade. But as it stands, the ending as it is now, with, you know, the self-impalement of Olivier and, you know, eat the diamonds, eat the diamonds. I just say to myself that as accustomed to it as I am now, and as much as I can project it every time I revisit the picture and I know what's coming, and I've gotten to a point now where I've actually embraced it to a certain extent. I still hasten to add that if it had gone with the book's ending, it really would have been, as put it this way, as masterful as the film is now, it would have been indescribably awesome in my eyes had they gone with the ending. So as far as dislike, Scott, I think that would have to be mine.
I mean, it's a hard one to fault. I don't think I have a particular opinion on the two. I understand why they went the way they went, but I
Yeah.
could see a world where they just had him shoot the guy, because I think,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to say anything was justified, but that's not I wasn't there, and it's also a fictional story. But,
Right.
you know, the story led him to the point where he probably would have taken revenge.
Right.
Yeah, I think like it doesn't bother me in like a jarring way the way that, say, like the ending of Die Hard with a Vengeance does. Where I'm
Oh,
like, what movie is this from?
yeah.
This is just like grafted onto this movie. And there's a few examples like that I can think of, but like this one, it definitely goes for something a little more upbeat in a way, where you have Dustin Hoffman throwing the gun away,
Yes.
ultimately, you know, symbolically releasing the guilt he feels for his father and, you know,
Mhm.
moving on with his life, I would assume. But
Right.
I can at least appreciate it because it's thematically consistent with where the character has been over the course of the movie. And I go, okay, well, you know what? Like, I'm okay with this. I do think like the Olivier roll down the stairs is a little too movie-ish,
Pantomime.
almost.
Yes.
Yeah, in comparison to some of the other action.
Yeah. Did you guys get the sense, to your point, Cam? Did you guys get the sense, and also to your point, Scott, because you commented on, although there was that feeling of grime and filth, that the design and the art direction and the ornateness of that climactic set was still very beautiful.
Mhm.
But did you get the sense that maybe there was a very pointed and deliberate reason as to why that spiral staircase was designed in that very sort of worm-like manner, so that Olivier could take that very protracted tumble and thus find himself at the bottom with the blade, you know, impaled in his gut? It almost seemed like the art direction and the design of the stairwell was to service that climactic bit of action. And that's how I saw it.
Sure. I mean, the only thing in terms of reactions I have to that set is it felt like it was straight out of a Batman film.
Yeah, totally looked that way.
It felt a little too clean.
It was
Yeah,
a little gothic-y. That's what I mean. That's what I'm getting
Right.
at there. Yeah. Not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But no, I know what you
No.
mean by like, I've tripped and fallen on the knife that we set up earlier in the film. Like, I guess it kind of makes sense. But I understand, as I say, I understand both choices there. I do have an actual dislike, Cam, but do you have something you want to bring up?
So I would say, like, one thing that I think I can accept as part of the movie, but the spy story of this one is quite confusing.
Sure.
It really is. To try to actually break down the details. It was, I watched it twice for this review and was definitely taking notes, especially the second watch, to kind of piece things together. But part of it works because of the point of view of the Dustin Hoffman character, who has no idea what's going on and is in over his head. But if you are someone who's trying to track the details of what is going on, it gets quite baffling, especially when you have, for example, the scene with the Marthe Keller character being attacked by the two guys in the woods who work for Zell and, the Devane villain. And wait, she's a courier. Isn't she working with them? What is going on? Like, I feel like a lot of that stuff gets very convoluted in a way that will frustrate some.
I'm not sure that jumped out to me at all particularly.
No? Did you not find any of it confusing at all to follow?
I don't think I really cared.
Exactly, Scott. That was my sentiment exactly.
Yeah.
In other words, it's all catering to what I said at the outset of our conversation when I surmised and determined that it was Goldman's overt, conscious decision to say that in attacking this story, he was going to do it in a way that did not necessarily honor or abide by the expectations of the genre. And as such, when you get to moments like that, if it becomes kind of a squabble, or if it becomes kind of a gray area as to who is in collusion with who and who's deceiving the other, I frankly didn't give a shit.
No, I don't either. I just look at it from the point of view of the Dustin Hoffman character, who is trying to even understand what's even going on.
Yeah.
I don't have those questions when it tends to be Roy Scheider scenes. And so maybe that's intentional as well.
It's kind of the case of, like, I understand us analyzing that because it's a spy movie podcast. Of course, we're going to try and look at the spy stuff. So I'm not knocking you for having had that thought. My point is more, I've always maintained that I care less about plot if I care about character, and I cared about the
100%.
character. So I wasn't doing the dot thing.
I felt the same way, but I needed a dislike.
Fair enough.
So there we go.
I'll give you one for the road. How
Yeah,
about
there you
that?
Okay.
All
right.
The whole dad trauma McCarthy era stuff that's mildly touched upon at the start of the film and lightly referenced a couple more times is quite underbaked. Like, it's just there. Like, the whole, like, you mentioned throwing the gun away and letting go of the past and his father and stuff. Like, I guess you could imply that metaphor upon the gun. It could also just be him trying to get rid of the evidence. Like, they set it up in the schoolroom, and it talks about his father and all that sort of stuff. There's not as much there as I thought they maybe perhaps is in the book. But yeah, I feel like they set something up there and don't really pay off the daddy issues.
Does the book delve into them more, Steve?
Slightly. And it's still, I would dare say, a little bit nebulous even in the book. But here's why, you guys, I believe that my single problem, my bone of contention, is actually perhaps a bit more justified than we even realize. And that is this. That climactic moment that you just referred to, Scott, where Scheider takes the 45 and throws it into the Hudson. Well, here's the irony. That moment is also still in the book. So now consider why Bill Goldman had it that way in the book. Because you have him using the piece, which he despises, because he cannot stand the notion of being a man of violence.
Yep.
But then at the end, he has to discard it because he's like, all right, you know what? Now this bane of my existence is gone. Now I can actually move on with being the pacifist I always kind of taught myself that I should be and am actually by nature. So now when you consider that the throwing of the piece is also in the book, but it's in the film, but now it's preceded by the odd, diamond-eating Batman set sequence. It's not quite as satisfying as it would have been had they gone with the book ending. So now that you guys know that the throwing of the piece is actually the end of the book, this is why I fight for that ending so much. So.
Right.
I think that's fair enough. I think we all had actually turned out to be quite valid points there, apart from Cam.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, little final notes and things that stand out to us before we get to the knock list. I just want to throw out, it was interesting to see the wrist dagger that is often used in the Assassin's Creed video games, and probably the film. I've never seen it used in this. I don't know if that's actually a real thing or not, but yeah, nice.
That was my actually other note. Like, that's all I had for my notes, was actually because we covered so much of the movie, but it was actually that retractable blade. It was a really cool gimmick to give the villain.
It's awesome. And just so you guys know, it's in the book as well. So it's not something that they just said, oh, this would be a really cool sort of visual device trope, call it what you will, for the movie. No, it's lifted right out of the book.
It's the kind of thing like the Anton Chigurh cattle gun that he uses in No Country for Old Men.
Oh yes, the air blower. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, to people's heads. Yeah, where it's just like a villain gimmick that's scary and feels real.
Yes.
But is like the kind of thing that it's kind of cool when you're selling a villain in a film.
Absolutely.
And the only other thing I wanted to make mention, and there's something I've referenced in the past on this show, and I will continue to do it because it's an image in my mind that will never not be funny, and that is of my dear co-host Cam. And that is later in the film, after hours of torture, Dustin Hoffman gets out and he's sort of tired and he's running and he becomes to sort of slouch over and he's sort of shuffling along a little bit. And that reminded me of Cam scurrying across the bedroom every single time we stay in a hotel room together, whenever he wants to get across and not be seen in the dark. And he looked just like Dustin Hoffman, just trying to not be seen as he's running along. It was, I was taken all the way back to that Las Vegas room that we shared. What a time.
Well, thank you, Scott. Well, there you have it. I guess my other, I'll say, that I'll add in this note was actually the makeup on Dustin Hoffman's teeth.
Yes.
After the torture, because that was really gnarly to look at and very effective.
Extremely, yeah.
Steve, do you have any, I'm sure there's many things you've noticed about the film over the years, but a particular interesting thing you've picked up on?
Well, I don't want to get overly gushy or sentimental about a film that is as unrelenting and as severe as this one is. But in closing, I think that there's an important and I think valid observation to make about the movie. And it actually has to do with Schlesinger and Olivier. And what it is this. I think that they were both coming at this project under certain circumstances that were diametrically opposed, but I think equally impassioned. And I think it's why they turned around and in their individual realms of craft delivered something that is as awesome as this is. From Schlesinger's point of view, he was coming off the heels of a pet project that was deeply personal, failed, but he knew that he needed to do something that was away from his comfort zone, but that also was part and parcel with a genre that he had always loved. And as a footnote, you guys, because you're both poster collectors, I'll have you know that unfortunately it's not here, it's down in my living room. I'm not going to walk there, but I have the poster for Marathon Man, and it's the original American one sheet. And you guys know how oftentimes in one sheets, there, Scott, I can see it on Star Trek The Motion Picture on yours. Mm-hmm. But you guys know how on these posters, besides the title and the credits, there's generally always a tagline.
Uh-huh.
There's always a tagline. Okay.
Yeah.
The tagline for Marathon Man was simply a thriller. That's it. That's all it was. And it was reflected over 6 times. So it went kind of like a ladder. It said a thriller 6 times. And I think that was important, not only in the marketing of that film, but also for Schlesinger to make clear to his audience, I've never done one of these, but I've invested and imbued it with as much soul and passion as I can muster. and I hope you appreciate it because of that. So I think that that is why it's so great from Schlesinger's point of view. And I'll close with Olivier by saying this. As you said earlier, Cam, he came to this picture not in the best of health. Everybody knew that.
Yeah.
And one thing to mention is that Evans, just so you guys know, Schlesinger wanted him, but the champion that really went to bat for him and ultimately got him cast was Bob Evans. What happened was he was deemed uninsurable. This is also Cam in the documentary.
Yeah.
He was deemed uninsurable. And when he went to Lloyd's of London, he basically said to them, he pleaded his case. And he said, you know something? Why don't you just do us all a favor? Give the man back his dignity. You're talking about arguably one of the three greatest actors that's ever lived. Allow him to do this picture, because at the end of the day, I guarantee you, it's not just that he'll be invested in the role, he'll be fine. He'll get through it. We promise you that. And what ended up happening? The joy of just the process of working so invigorated and adrenalized Olivier so much that what it went on to do was it added 13 years to his life. He died in 89. The film was in 76.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, you guys. After Marathon Man, there was a slew of absolutely marvelous, perhaps not all films, but marvelous performances that Olivier did on film that are indelible. After Marathon Man, he had incredible supporting roles in A Bridge Too Far, also written by Bill Goldman, by the way. Had a great supporting role in Diane Lane's first movie called The Little Romance. He was, in my eyes, as much as I love Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, all right, they're gods to me, both of them. Mm-hmm. But to my eyes, he was the definitive Van Helsing in John Badham's Dracula, where Frank Langella played Dracula. Another great late Olivier performance. He played Zeus in Clash of the Titans. He was in Roger Donaldson, the director of No Way Out. He was in Donaldson's great movie, The Bounty. This was in 84. He worked straight up to 1988 and passed in 89.
Yeah.
So why am I mentioning this? Why is this even relevant? Because what Marathon Man gave us also, besides a masterpiece of a film, is it gave us the gift of Olivier in a way that we hadn't seen in years because he'd been absent for several because of his ailing health. But Marathon Man, in its own way, cured him. And it allowed him to go on and make all the terrific pictures that he made afterwards. So, in conclusion, it may not be the reason why I love this film as much as I do and why it's my favorite spy picture of all time. But I will say to you that his participation and Schlesinger's realization of it has a great deal to do with it.
I can't think of a better way of wrapping up this conversation.
Yeah.
I've got one last duty for us, and that is the knock list.
Knock list. Knock list. Knock list. The knock list. The knock list. Knock list. Knock list. Knock list. To pick a side.
I think Steve may have telegraphed his answer. Well, that's a spy twist, though, isn't it? Really, just hang us out to dry. No, yeah. Steve, come on. Yes or no? Marathon Man.
Top of the knock list, 100%. Top of the knock list, the same way that North by Northwest is the Mount Everest of the knock list. That this too for me. It's a no-brainer, all the way.
Okay, that's one. Cameron.
Big time yes for me as well. For all the reasons we've talked about for the past 2 hours.
And I will make it easy. It's a yes from me. It's a trifecta of joy. We have hit a PB for our marathon run. Marathon Man itself is making the knock list. The dossier on the film is complete and filed as classified. And that leaves us with one final duty. And that is to say thank you to you, Steve, for making your second appearance on the show.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's always a pleasure. And talking about this movie with you guys at this breadth and to this extent has been really very special. And it's great to see that you both are as adamant in your, really, I'm going to just say, love for this movie as mine is. This was a real treat. Thank you again.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you. It's been a pleasure talking about the film, but I'd be remiss if I let you go without giving you a little bit of a chance to spin and tell us, because you've got a new book out.